Okay, it's 1:30, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to this board meeting of the Houston Forensic Science Center. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 1:30 p.m. on Wednesday, the 10th of June. Just a couple reminders. Remember, there may be a delay in the audio. So when you unmute yourself to speak, just kind of we'll give everybody a chance to do that so that everyone can be heard. Don't forget the raise your hand function that Jordan showed you if we have that. If you have that on your screen, we'll try and use that, and then Jordan's going to help monitor, and Ramit will help monitor as to who is doing what, so that way we can make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. Let's see. I think those are all of the quick reminders. Let's go ahead and do the roll call and confirmation of the presence of the quorum. Madam Secretary.
Chairwoman Mitchell.
Here.
Vice Chair Lenschke.
Here.
And Vice Chair, if you could please continue to speak until your video comes up on the screen.
Okay. I am here.
Sorry, just a little more. There we go.
I am here.
Thank you, Mary. Director Vasquez.
Here.
Director Hilder.
Present.
Director Medina.
Here.
And Director Medina, if you could please speak until your video comes up on the screen.
Here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. And there you are. Thank you very much. Director Blanchett.
Good morning, present.
Director McPherson.
Here.
Director Moore.
Here.
Director Huff. Ex officio Calabrese.
I'm here, Jordan.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a quorum. As you all know, we're hosting our second HFSC board meeting by video conference. This meeting is being held in compliance with Governor Abbott's suspension of certain provisions of the Texas Open Meeting Act in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency. The board is mindful of the health and safety of its members, staff, presenters, and the public. HFSC, like many local government entities in the state, is utilizing video conferencing today to limit face-to-face interactions of large groups in an effort to slow the spread of COVID-19. Let me remind everyone to mute their microphones, and please remember to unmute when you go to speak. I'll give everyone just a few minutes to mute now. Okay, at this time, I would like to take one agenda item out of order because I think it's important that I need to present this information before we discuss the rest of our agenda today. If there isn't any objection for the board, I would like to take up agenda item number 7 right now, which is the chair's report. Are there any objections from the board regarding taking agenda item number 7 out of order? Okay, hearing no objection from the board, I will proceed with item number 7. All right, which is the chair's report. There are a few things that I would like to read. With the recent events, it really has had, I think, everyone thinking and really self-reflecting and reflecting about a lot of things. And I talked to a lot of people, including folks at HFSC, before I pulled this together, and I think it's really important for me to read this. And so here we go. And then afterwards, I will ask if anyone has a response. The recent events surrounding the tragic deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and so many others have forced us to look head on at racism, discrimination, and injustice that has been pervasive within our country for far too long. As we grieve for them all, that grief has generated outrage, fear, sadness, and an unyielding desire for change. Messages from community leaders reflect the pain we all feel, and we all have a desire to participate and be part of community solutions that address the ongoing issues of racism and equality that persist in the United States, especially in the Black community. We must address these issues at all levels. Not speaking up means condoning racism and discrimination. We no longer can deny or ignore what is happening in our communities. This is an opportunity for reform and lasting change. At the Houston Forensic Science Center, we stand together against racism and injustice. HFSC was born out of reform. We are now a local government corporation overseen by a 9-member board of directors. Our mission is to receive, analyze, and preserve physical and digital evidence while adhering to the highest standards of quality, objectivity, and ethics. We value and stand for fairness, impartiality, and transparency, which are all hallmarks of reform. We stand here as evidence that true reform can happen and as a beacon for change in the hopes that we can be part of future solutions. It's not about finding an answer, it's about finding, as Dr. Stout says, the right answer. We are hopeful that as a community, we will continue the dialogue and move to real lasting change, and that HFSC will be a vocal part of that discussion. I'd like to open up to see if any of the board members or anyone has any response to our statement. Okay, hearing none, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to help and speak on behalf of the Board of Directors and HFSC.
Madam Chair, excuse me
Yes,
for
ma'am.
interrupting. I believe Director Vasquez had her hand raised.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I missed it. I apologize. Director Vasquez, please.
No, it's fine. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's very fitting at this time. So for us to make a statement, I think it's very important that we're all a part of it and, you know, in support of making a change. So yes, I appreciate that.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else? Did I miss anything? Do I see the little hands? No. Okay. Okay. I believe that most of us already know, but I just wanted to, again, talk about this in my report. Dr. Daniel Garner, who was HFSC's first CEO and president, passed away on Thursday, May 28th at his home with his family by his side. Dr. Garner was our first CEO and president and served during the crucial transition from HPD to independence. He was appointed because he was a renowned forensic scientist and had previously held many significant positions. I would like just to take a second to highlight his distinguished career, because we have had some changes on the board to our board members, and they may not know everything that Dr. Garner, who he was and where and his accomplishments, but they all really impacted how we are and how we got to where we are today. Dr. Garner earned his BA in chemistry from David Lipscomb College and his PhD in medicinal chemistry from the University of Tennessee. He was the chief of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Forensic Science Lab from 1973 to 1987. He was president of Cellmark Diagnostics in Germantown, Maryland from 1987 to 1998. He returned to Washington as chief of the Forensic Services section of Criminal Division for the Department of Justice from 1999 to 2012. The city of Houston lured him to Houston to lead the Houston Police Department's crime lab transition after he retired from the Department of Justice. He served as president and CEO from 2013 to 2016. Dr. Garner is served by his wife, his son and daughter, and their spouses, and his 5 grandchildren. We thank him for his service not only to HFSC, but for his contributions to forensic science, and he will be greatly missed. In addition, I would also like to acknowledge the passing of Dr. Clifford Spiegelman, a key member of the Houston Forensic Science Center's Technical Advisory Group. He passed away on May the 14th at the age of 71. Dr. Spiegelman is survived by his wife and 3 daughters. He advised HFSC and the board on matters concerning statistical analysis and forensic science. Dr. Spiegelman has had a long and distinguished career, and I'd like to just take a second to read part of his obituary from the Eagle, which is the newspaper in Bryan College Station. He was a faculty member there and a distinguished professor and Regents professor at Texas A&M University. He received his Bachelor's of Science from the State University of New York at Buffalo in 1970 and his PhD in Statistics and Applied Mathematics from Northwestern University in 1976. During the Vietnam War, he served in the Army Reserves as a radio operator. Dr. Spiegelman worked for the National Bureau of Standards, which is now NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, in Maryland for 9 years before starting a tenured professorship at the Department of Statistics at Texas A&M University. To highlight a few of his accomplishments, he worked with the Texas Department of Transportation for many years to establish standards for road quality and regulations. He worked with the National Cancer Institute to help identify what chemical indicators in blood samples would allow for early and accurate diagnosis of cancers. He co-founded the Journal of Chemometrics and Intelligent Laboratory Systems and served as its editor for a long period of time. Dr. Spiegelman is perhaps best known for his work in forensic science. He fiercely advocated for better training for investigators and higher standards for interpreting statistics in the context of criminal evidence, such as firearms, tool marks, and chemical analysis of bullet fragments. Dr. Spiegelman received numerous awards for his work, including the JSM Statistics and Chemistry Award and the Don Owen Award. Justice was deeply motivating to Dr. Spiegelman, and after realizing the many flaws in the criminal justice system, he devoted himself to working with the Innocence Project to help exonerate people convicted on the basis of faulty evidence. In 2017, he was appointed Statistics Advisor to the Texas Forensic Science Commission, and he was promoted to Distinguished Fellow and Professor in 2009 and Regents Professor in 2019 at Texas A&M. We know Dr. Spiegelman will definitely be missed. We used him and relied on his guidance quite a bit in terms of statistical analysis. I would like to close with a quote from him that I think is very fitting. Learn as much as you can about everything, including the sciences and humanities. The more you understand, the more useful you will be. And finally, in closing out my report, I would like to thank Dr. Bob McPherson for his service to HFSC's Board of Directors. This is Dr. McPherson's last meeting as his term is coming to an end after 5 years of serving on this board and helping oversee and guide significant events, including our recent facility move. A little bit about Dr. McPherson, and I am going to embarrass you probably, but you know, I'm the chair and I get to do that. So as professor and dean of the University of Houston's College of Education, Dr. McPherson oversees the daily academic affairs, business operations, and administrative support services of the college, which is a job in and of itself. He, in addition to teaching and helping and serving on this board, Dr. McPherson has been ranked number 21 on a list of the 30 most influential deans of education in the United States, which is really cool. So now we all know an influential dean. Let's see, Dr. McPherson is a fellow of the American Psychological Association and the American Educational Research Association. He has led the College of Education as dean since 2012. Dr. McPherson has long been a staunch supporter of HFSC. His insight and perspective helped shape the mission and values of the crime laboratory. He has served on our finance subcommittees as we developed our annual budgets for several years. And I would like to thank you for your dedication and support to HFSC. We hope that you will continue to support our mission and offer up your wisdom as you watch HFSC move along this journey. I'd like to open the floor if anyone has any responses.
Well, I'll respond. It's been an honor and a privilege to work alongside you guys. It's such an extraordinary first-class operation, and to somehow have my name affiliated with it gives me a real sense of pride. I also want to thank you for the gift commemorating my service on the board. I suspect Peter had some. Did you do this in your garage? But it's beautiful, and it will be prominently displayed in my office at the university. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet, Director Blanchett, I see your hand. You are muted. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
I'd like to thank Dr. McPherson for his service on the board. He was one of the individuals who was here before I got here. And so it was very useful to have someone of your experience and wisdom here to draw upon. So I'm sorry to see you go, but it sounds like you still have a great future doing other things.
All right. Is there anyone else? Did I miss any hands? Let me look. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, thank you again, Dr. McPherson. Okay, back to our agenda. I'm going to end the chair's report and I'm going to head back to our agenda. Alrighty, item number 3 is to consider the annual selection of the board vice chair and possible related action. If the board will recall, we unanimously approved a resolution in January of this year to select the vice chair of the board annually as it coincides with the appointment of the HFSC corporate officers. Vice Chair Mary Lynchke is currently the board vice chair and has been in that position since November of 2019. I would like to nominate her to continue as vice chair. And I will open for a second and discussion in that of this topic.
I second. Medina?
Okay, thank you. That was Director Medina. Thank you. All right, is there any discussion? Okay, I don't hear any, so we have to do a roll call vote for this. So, Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll for us?
Yes. Chairwoman Mitchell,
Yes, I vote yes.
Director Vasquez,
I vote yes.
Director Hilder,
Yes.
Director Medina,
Yes.
Director Blanchett,
I vote yes.
Director McPherson,
Yes.
Director Moore. Director Moore, you are muted. Please unmute yourself to vote. And Director Moore, you're still muted. There's a microphone icon. Just click that once and the slash should go away.
Yes.
Thank you, Director Moore. Director Huff. Vice Chair Lynchke.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries unanimously. So you're still vice chair.
Thank you,
so-
everyone. I appreciate the support.
Thank you. We certainly appreciate you and stepping up and willing to assist and be vice chair. And we'll do this for another year. All right. Okay. Okay. Next is item number 4 on the agenda, which is consideration for the annual appointment of corporate officers. Dr. Peter Stout as president, Dr. Amy Castillo as vice president, Mr. David Leach as treasurer, Ms. Jordan Benton as secretary, and I think that's all of our corporate officers. So I would like to call for a motion for this slate.
Do I need to raise my hand? This is Hilda. Do I need to raise my hand first or can I just speak?
You can just speak.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to nominate the slate as read of officers and move that they be approved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we had a bunch of people seconding. Did I hear Dr. McPherson second? Yes. Okay. That was you. Okay, great. All right. So the second is Dr. McPherson. Okay, we have to do a roll call vote again for this one. We've got a couple things we've got to vote, and because we are live and a video and screen, or actually video recording this, we need to make sure that we record all the votes. So, Madam Secretary, would you mind calling the roll again for the vote for this topic?
Yes, Madam Chair. Chairwoman Mitchell,
I vote to approve.
Vice Chair Lenschke,
I vote to approve.
Director Vasquez,
I vote to approve.
Director Hilder,
I too vote to approve.
Director Medina,
I vote to approve.
Director Blanchette,
I vote to approve.
Director McPherson,
I vote to approve.
Director Moore,
I vote to approve.
Director Huff.
Okay, there we go. The motion carries unanimously. So, Dr. Stout, you're it for another year. Yes. Okay. Congratulations to everyone. Thank you. We appreciate your service to HFSC and looking forward to continuing to work with you again for another year. All righty. Our next item on the agenda is the public comment period. Let's see, we are providing 2 ways for the public to comment during this meeting in accordance with the governor's directive. First, the board meeting notice provided an email address for members of the public to send requests to speak during the public comment period. Those requests were required to be sent to us by Tuesday, June the 9th at 1:30 p.m. Madam Secretary, did we receive any requests for comments by email?
No, Madam Chair, I did not receive any requests via email to speak at our board meeting today.
Okay, thank you. All right, to make sure we are giving the public every opportunity to participate in this meeting, I will open the floor now to provide time for anyone on this video conference from the public who would like to speak. If there is anyone who would like to speak during this time, please unmute yourself now and state your name. Okay, I'm not hearing anyone, but I am going to do like we did at the previous meeting and leave this period open for probably the next topic of discussion, so that if anyone is having trouble logging in, that if they are able to log in, then we'll go back and revisit this if they get on board, if that's okay with everyone. Okay, next is the minutes, approval of the minutes for the May 8th, 2020 board meeting. If everyone has had a chance to look at that, I will entertain a motion for approval.
I move approval.
Okay, that is Director Moore. Thank you. Is there a second?
I have a second.
Okay, Director Blanchette. Thank you. All righty. Are there any changes or any discussion that we need to have about the minutes?
No.
Okay, hearing, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Hearing none, we get to have a voice vote. Oh, we get to voice vote on this one. That's good. All right, all those, please unmute everybody. All those in favor, please say aye. And if you've got the little hand thing, raise your hand too. We'll take that as an aye also.
Aye.
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 Okay, is there anyone that disapproves? Okay, great. The motion carries. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Okay. The next one is, hang on, moving down. We did 7 already. Okay. Number 8 on the agenda is the report from Dr. Stout, our president and CEO, who will talk about a facility update regarding the 500 Jefferson building and any ongoing renovations to the vehicle examination bay, technical updates, outreach efforts, staffing changes, and other corporate business items, including long-term planning for operating during the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Stout, you now have the floor.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right, good. So appreciate everybody managing to make it here this afternoon in our strange world that we keep dealing with. I got to say, I'm kind of over disaster planning, pandemics, riots, hurricanes. It's been an adventure here recently, no question. So, all right, come on, there it goes. Oops, sorry, back up there. Yeah, so Bob, Stacy said most of it there, but I can't thank you enough for the support. This coming to this job, I know was going to be an adventure. We have definitely had some adventurous moments in this, and I can't say enough how much I've appreciated the support over the years. You've been a good friend and ally in it, so I appreciate that. So yes, yeah, this is a fake background. I'm actually in my garage because with everybody working here, that's what I got was the garage. So I'm out here with my saws. But I hope you enjoy the box. I enjoyed making it. It's cherry, and the top is maple, and then the inlay in it is, let's see, I'm trying to remember, oak, cherry, maple. I think there's a little bit of wingy in there too.
Thank you, Peter. And I probably don't have anything that's as nice as the box to put in it, but I will put it on display. Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate all your help over the years. All right, so typical stuff. Turnaround times are what they are. Keep in mind with particularly biology and latent prints, as they have had some ability to work on older cases, those turnaround times go up because we calculate turnaround times based on completed. So once it gets reported out, if it was something from quite a while ago, like what latent prints has been able to start getting to, that's why their turnaround time is up where it is. I'll also point out in this that toxicology has been finding a new gear here. They got a couple of more analysts for alcohol results signed off, and it showed. They got a lot of reports out in May. That is, if you kind of keep in mind what that graph usually looks like, usually toxicology is somewhere about 20 to 25% of what's reported, not a third of what we're reporting out in a month. So they made a lot of progress on stuff last month. Staffing has been progressing. We actually have filled a couple of the DNA analyst positions. Those have accepted. I'm trying to remember. I know one of those is coming from Florida. I forget where the other one's coming from, but so we've had some success in filling positions. I mentioned, I think a couple of times, that our longtime technical lead, Robin Guidry, has gone back to nursing school. She is working part-time with us to help the transition for our technical lead. And in the interim, until we find a more permanent solution, Courtney Head, who's the manager, will serve as the acting TL in that interim. So we've got coverage for it. Robin's still around to help us out through that transition, but that is a difficult position to fill. The one opening that's in seized drugs, we still have that on hold as we watch and see what productivity needs are. They're keeping up just fine, so we don't have an urgent need to fill that position. So we'll take our time and look at that one. Well, footnote on there, while we have posted and we have begun recruiting and we've done quite a few interviews, we haven't made any offers yet on the toxicology positions that are in the budget that y'all approved. Want to make sure everything gets through with the city. I know there's more than just a few complexities these days on what the city's wrestling with. I think I'm optimistic about things. So we actually had a really good response in posting, particularly the less experienced positions. I think we got somewhere around 400 resumes for those less experienced positions, which was nice to see. And I think we've got a couple of experienced candidates as well that they're considering. Any questions around staffing?
Peter, it looks like Director Blanchett has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
From our previous discussion, it was noted that some positions may be able to do remotely
Yes.
Were any of those that we have here that are active vacancies capable of being done remotely?
Of the active vacancies, certainly not crime scene. Biology, the tech lead would be one that could, periodically work from home, but needs to be back and forth. Multimedia analyst, that group they trade off. They're doing every other day, on site and off site. There are some issues. I mean, the technologies that they use, it's all computer stuff. You could get them set up elsewhere. The difficulty there is handling a lot of the files, and those files themselves may be contraband. So then trying to hand those over the internet can create issues. And certainly the R&D analyst is one that would be possible to largely work from elsewhere. And they have 2 candidates that they're looking at for that one. I'm not sure if they've made a decision yet, but I know they had 2 final candidates on that R&D position.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so outreach stuff. We have continued to actually manage to do some outreach. Sorry, I was just trying to move this around so it's not there in the screen. I did a presentation for, I can never remember the acronym of it, but it is basically the agency in China that oversees quality assurance programs for laboratory testing in China, and that's clinical, all kinds of laboratory testing. They were interested in our blind quality control program and invited me to speak at that. So I did a recorded presentation for that. I think actually that presentation is the 13th, 14th is when they're holding that meeting there and would show that video. I did another recorded video for the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyer Association conference, which is called the Rusty Duncan Conference. That's their major conference in the year. It shifted to being virtual. It is also next week that'll present. I actually will be online for questions at the time of that. So there's still some things going on. I did another virtual presentation for the Bay Area Coalition on Drug Abuse and Treatment, BARCODA. I get their acronym wrong all the time as well. Talking mostly about COVID-19's impact on the laboratory. And we've had a couple of other staff that have been able to do presentations elsewhere in the country. And so we're looking on for places. It's a good outlet for staff. They can participate. They get a little bit of a change in, well, I guess they don't get too much of a change in scenery, but at least something different to do in the day. So we're finding more of these. It's different. It's not better. It's not necessarily worse, but it is different. So main thing I wanted to cover with y'all today is what we've been doing to contend with the long-term circumstances of the pandemic. So several weeks ago, about 6 weeks ago, set up an internal committee that had staff all across the organization. We looked at 4 main topics to start with. One about what would be our supply challenges, one about what does it look like if we've got to go off and on, as cases spike back up and we have new restrictions, how do we work as effectively as we can and maintain our ability to work remotely or elsewhere as best we can? What happens when we start having restrictions released? Because we've already kind of been through this. And what kind of IT resources do we need to consider? So as we had conversations on those, we had some more detailed topics appear, and we reassigned groups to look at those individual topics. So out of those, we had one group that looked very specifically at IT resources. So main items that they've identified, and we have gone through the organization surveying, finding who needs what. It's mostly peripherals at this point that are what the organization needs. We've continued to order these. We continue to run into some supply issues, but it's monitors, webcams, headsets, things like that for people to work effectively in meetings just like this. So we've got that list. Once we have cash on the other side of July, we will get all those ordered and get those in place, and we'll continually evaluate what of those types of things we need to order. And then there's a crossover in this over into some of the larger items of network changes, other things that we need to add that are more capital items that really became more of a topic for how do we continue to keep people able to work from home. So working from home, the group identified on the shorter term end of things, most of what people were finding they needed are help just figuring out how to effectively work from home, how to manage their day, encouragement on, and I know I have this problem. You wake up in the morning, the day starts, and the day doesn't stop until basically you fall over into bed at night. Very difficult to isolate work from home in working in this environment. So they've been pulling documents, they've been finding those places to help out with that, other resources that we can help with that, and they're designing a new page within our intranet that'll be a clearinghouse for that. The other thing that they identified was, of those working from home, they've got capacity to work on projects. It may be a project in another discipline. How do we facilitate the communication of those that have availability to work on projects with projects that need people to work on them? So that's also being built into that intranet site to try and help facilitate communication and be a clearinghouse for connecting people with projects. And we're figuring we'll have that live here by the end of this month. Any questions so far? Janet, I see your hand up there.
Okay. Now, as you know, there was some penetration testing that was done before any of the lockdown happened. And that was done with a very different kind of configuration with people being in the office. Now that we're looking at changing the configuration so people can work remotely and in the office, depending on which group you're in, is there any plan to include penetration testing after that configuration change is done?
Well, so without getting into too many details of what all they tested, the virtual private network that we run on was part of that testing, and so would effectively be the main component of how these people work from externally. That was tested, and we did make some modifications to that based out of that testing. Other components of that are certainly policy-based, things that we continue to consider and have tried to establish policies around. Is now you have somebody with their individual computer sitting at home, making sure that they understand they may have privileged information that provides access to, that they need to be additionally careful of that computer. We have a mobile device management system that all of our devices are managed on. And we don't put that VPN client on any bring your own device. Only HFSC managed devices and only HFSC managed devices that have mobile device management are eligible that. So we have the ability to reach out and brick something if it goes AWOL. But yes, as we consider what the ongoing security testing will be, obviously it's going to have to include more stress of the remote access that people have. That answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. We also had a group looking at, of all those tools that are out there, how can we help people work more effectively? One of the things, they did a survey company-wide, and the biggest things they found was providing some additional, basically training, kind of just-in-time training aspects for how to use Teams better, how to use calendaring, shared drives, those collaboration tools more effectively. So they are in the process of building little video help that are specific to us and how we use things, as well as compiling those. Microsoft has a ton of these training videos out there. There's all kinds of resources available, but vetting through some of those that they think are going to be the most effective, as well as making some longer training videos for how to use some things specifically. And those will go again to that intranet site that we're building, and they're planning on having those materials, at least starting to have those materials available by the end of the month. It's, I went over, I think it was last time, some of the adaptation and adoption of Teams that the organization has done. I mean, it's been immense. They've really shifted and adapted to using this pretty successfully. But I think there's some refinement of that, and there's a lot of tools and power within the Office 365 environment. There was one group that was looking at basically cleanliness items. How do we try and prevent infection around the office? We now have a bunch of new posters that we're rotating through every week or two, try and keep things visible about that. And we spent some time working with the building. The building is now cleaning common areas, so the galleys, microwaves, those types of things, bathrooms twice a day. And we've arranged with the building that if, and unfortunately it's probably when, we have somebody that is COVID positive, we're arranged so we know they'll come in and do a deep cleaning and sanitizing of that area that we agree to when we've got somebody that's positive. Certainly testimony is an issue, and what's going to happen there. We had a group that brought this up and then dug into trying to figure out what all needs to happen. The Texas Supreme Court just issued, I guess it's an opinion. Keela can probably straighten me out there on what it's called, but they recommended for jury trials to resume August 3rd. Now, what happens in Harris County specifically, we'll see, but that's what the Texas Supreme Court was suggesting. So we have put together a memo that we will ultimately send out to district attorney, public defenders, criminal defense attorneys, anybody we can find, trying to help them understand what our capabilities are to do distance testimony, explaining how it could work, certainly trying to encourage them to use it, work with us to be able to provide that. We have done some, kind of lost track which groups I've discussed this with, but we had one biology analyst that testified in a case in Fort Bend. These were both prior to COVID. They were this year, but prior to COVID, and one that testified in Austin on some cases that we're doing for Austin. Both of those worked really well. So it can work quite well. Not only is it time efficient for us, I think the testimony in Austin took about 45 minutes, and that would have been an analyst that would have been out of the office for 2 days for a 45-minute testimony. But also certainly helps protect the staff. We'll have some newsletter articles that also go out externally, so do as much as we can to try and educate other stakeholders about using distance testimony.
And Peter, that was the, oh, sorry.
That's okay.
So just for clarification, that was another order out of the Supreme Court. It's
Gotcha.
actually the 17th emergency order about it. And the date is August 1st for when they are saying the jury trial should not begin back up. But there are caveats to that, which I will be happy to explain probably more so in Erica's quality presentation. She has a slide about that, so I can talk about that more.
So all of those are pretty quick hit things that we can get done in the next few weeks. Longer term items that will take more time and will also probably take more investment. Paperless workflows. Toxicology was able to get a paperless workflow together pretty quickly. Has been pretty successful at implementing that, but this will take more work. There's policy changes, procedural changes, probably some network changing that we'll need to do to make it as robust as we can and as accessible as we can for people to basically get away from as much paper that's involved. Seized drugs is probably the place that we're spending the most time on this, and that will involve how do we network those instruments. How do we move that information off, access to those instruments? So it's going to take some more time to understand and get that stuff implemented. Certainly the issue of scheduling has come up. How do we use scheduling as a tool in this? Really what this group was finding is the individual units have come to a pretty good optimum of how they've got themselves scheduled. We've been able to keep up productivity-wise pretty well. They have set some red lines out there of where If we see turnaround times or other metrics exceed something, then we need to reevaluate and think about how they're working. So basically, what we saw with controlled substances, that we needed them to all come back on site so that we can get enough done in the laboratory to make things work. But that it worked with them about how to get to that point. What is pretty clear is doing more shifts or shifts outside of the core business hours of the building come with some real costs. We have a pretty favorable cost structure for air conditioning in the building, but it still adds up. And it also comes into issues of buses and parking. The main garage that we use for personnel is not a 24/7 garage. It's Monday through Friday, I think 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. So there are some other issues that go with trying to extend shifts beyond CSU. It's not that it's impossible, but it does mean there's got to be a real benefit to having those shifts in order to justify some of the other costs. So, the other one that, just for an example, firearms currently has about a 40-day turnaround time, which is below their target for this year. If they get up to 60 days, we need to figure out something else. So we've set some targets in there where, give it some time to be able to see what's going on, but that's at a time that we think we can be able to recover and get back within their tolerance levels if they get up there and make some changes. So any questions about any of that so far? So supply issues, I've mentioned some supply issues at past meetings. Certainly supply is a constant worry in our worldwide constraints of supply chains. This group looked pretty hard at stuff and came to the conclusion that Jenny O'Callahan and Mario are doing a marvelous job of being pretty proactive about things. So supply issues are really kind of off and on. I think we have done a pretty good job of shaking out most of the commoditized, high production kinds of materials, low margin, that seem to have been the biggest sources of potential problems, and have got most of those. We've got a 6-month buffer sitting on the floor in supply. Biggest issue that we've got at the moment is large gloves, not other sizes, just large sized gloves. The current vendor that we've been using has told us that they can't send supplies of those until December, which is out past the 4 months that we've got sitting on the floor. But I think they are fast on the way to identifying some other vendors that we could use in order to get hold of those gloves. So that's, they're doing a pretty good job of trying to see around the corners on those. Any questions about supply stuff? I know I've mentioned a few. The other supply things, the pipette tips, we've got a solution to those. We've got between a 6-month and a year supply of almost all of the various pipette tips that we were concerned about. So I'm less worried about that one now. All right, so a little bit of a shift. The vehicle examination building, which is what we've been working on for a renovation. We have the interlocal agreement. So if you'll recall, there is the job order contracting system within the city of Houston, because this is a construction project. We've got federal grant money and federal construction rules that we need to abide by, as well as city and state rules. Those JOCs meet the requirements. So it would be very useful to be able to use those JOCs. That involved establishing a small ILA between us and the city of Houston that basically says we are eligible to use those. I think we've gotten everything in place now for that to be on the agenda for city council meeting the 17th and get that in place and done. So just a little bit on the scope of the project. Remember, it's $152,000. We have, and I think we will have by the end of this week, a good cost estimate on what the air conditioning will be. We've got air conditioning contractors doing those assessments right now. Probably are not going to be able to do just a whole lot beyond air conditioning and those overhead doors in that budget. So we will have a list of those items that we want to get done, and as we have capital available, we will pick at getting the rest of them done. I do think, because the main timeline that we have to be aware of for the federal money is that the work has to be done by the end of December. So we're still comfortable that we can get that done, which then allows us to use the federal money. The last little bit is the firearm basement's firing range. Remember, we've been working at a ventilation solution down there since we moved in. They have redesigned what they're doing. They are refabricating new ductwork, and there is a new fan motor that just arrived today. So we expect them to start that project probably tomorrow, maybe Friday. They're figuring it's about 4 days. Seems a little optimistic to me, but I'm expecting that we may have that solution in place in the next couple of weeks. Are there any questions I can answer on stuff? That ends the stuff that I had. All righty. Well, thanks again, y'all.
Thank you, Dr. Stout. Madam Secretary, has anyone logged in from the public? Have you noticed at this time that would make a comment?
Madam Chair, no, ma'am. We have not received additional participants in this meeting, and I still have not been contacted via email or phone for the members of the public to speak at our board meeting today.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period. I would also like to recognize Mr. Darrell Davis, who's part of our technical advisory group. He is here with us as well. Welcome. And moving on to our next item on the agenda is the monthly operations report from Dr. Castillo, who's Vice President and COO, including a review of turnaround times and backlog of sexual assault kits. Dr. Castillo.
Good afternoon. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, and see my screen?
Yes, we can see you and your screen.
Good. Okay, Dr. Amy Castillo, the Chief Operations Officer. Good afternoon. So basically this month I'm going to go over the overview that we normally do. I'm trying to see which screen my mouse is on to progress. So on this slide, I want to go over a couple of things. One thing that Dr. Stout had mentioned is that NRC's drug section in this last month, we did go back to what I would say in quotes normal operation, meaning that all of the staff are back on site so that they can work in the lab. The reason we did this is we were seeing an increase back to pre-COVID requests coming in the door. And we knew if we still had people split, we were not going to be able to keep up with that. They did a great job during that time. You can see that they have a really good turnaround time of 14 days, but we weren't going to be able to sustain that if we did not bring people back. So starting June 1st, that whole section is back. Thankfully, Peter has a really good workshop and he was able to build some partitions for us out of plexiglass in the lab to help distance people. We also have in people's cubicles, we put up some curtains that actually prior had been more to reduce distractions, but we thought would be a good reminder to people as well to try to stay distant from each other when they're in their cubicles and to wear their masks. So the other thing I wanted to mention was the blood alcohol requests. So the section, they are still using the same workflow we put in place to deal with COVID, which is they rotate on and off site. But they actually, I mean, they've worked more cases doing that than they have in a while. Between that and the 2 new analysts, they were actually able to clear a little over 260 requests out of their backlog in the last month, which is really impressive. It also shows, hopefully we get the analysts that we put in the budget, because you can see when we get those analysts into the system and signed off, it really is going to help us get back to where we need to be on blood alcohol testing. The other section I wanted to call out is NIBIN. So NIBIN is our gun database, similar to CODIS, but for firearms. They saw an increase in requests in the past month as well. They had 100 more requests than they did in the same period of time last year, but they were able to maintain less than a 48-hour turnaround time on that. And what's helping with that some is that the firearms examiners, the way they're dealing with their schedule in COVID, they're able to focus when they're working from home on the reviews of the NIBIN cases. And so that's where, when Dr. Stout mentioned flags, why we have those flags in place, so that if we get too high on the firearms turnaround time, we know we need to make adjustments so that we can keep both of those turnaround times where they need to be. Since we are having the firearms examiners also focus on helping the NIBIN reviews. And then good news overall, we actually saw a decrease in the percent of our cases that are in backlog. It's been a little while since we've seen it go that direction. It's been some challenging times. So as you can see, in April, we were almost at 25%. In May, we're at 22.9. So we were excited to see that. That stems from the blood alcohol backlog being worked on. Also, we'll talk more about biology, but the outsourced reviews that they've been clearing out of the backlog, that also helps with that overall backlog number getting lower. Do y'all have any questions before I go to the next slide? Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is the sexual assault kit update. As a heads up, I basically plan on talking to y'all every board meeting about this. As we mentioned at the last board meeting, because we're bringing probabilistic genotyping online, or we have brought it online, it's unknown for us how much this is going to impact how quickly we can get cases out the door. And so it's hard. I can't right now give you a target of when we're going to have this problem resolved. So I want to make sure I'm updating you every month on where we're at with the backlog. So as you can see, we still have 587 kits over 30 days. That's not that different than last month. It did actually, as we were working on our changes, ramp up. It went up a little bit and started coming back down during the month. Hopefully you saw that in the weekly updates, because we dedicated, right now we have 5 analysts dedicated to sexual assault kits. And as you can see, it makes a difference. We got 45 out the door this past month, whereas prior we were either focusing on outsourced reviews because of COVID, STAR Mix training. And when we were doing STAR Mix training, a lot of the cases that were being worked were not SAKs. And the reason for that is because we were planning on outsourcing the SAKs. And so we were trying to prioritize the work in-house that we knew we had to do in-house. That isn't going to continue to work right now. So we made those changes. And as you can see, we're definitely increasing the number that are going out the door in a month. And I expect that number to get higher next month because some of these changes were made during the month of May. Okay, the other thing is we still have a team working on outsourced reviews. Like we mentioned last time, the outsourced reviews are when our analysts technically review the work that's been done by a vendor laboratory. This has to be done in order for any of the profiles from that data to be put into CODIS, which is the ultimate goal on these, is to get these profiles into CODIS. So as you can see, they did a little less than last month as far as completed, which is the orange line on right here. However, we were still able to make a lot of progress on the number of outsourced reviews that we have pending. The reason that number went down is because we pulled some people off of that to work on the SAKs that we have in-house. And as you can see with the CODIS entries, again, not quite as high as last month, but still much higher than normal with the number of CODIS entries that we have due to the outsourced reviews and also the number of matches that we're getting back. Any questions so far? Okay. So the other thing I wanted to give you a quick update on is we are progressing on getting our last people signed off. We had 2 analysts that were signed off this past month. They were our new DNA analysts that had the probabilistic genotyping added to their training. So we were excited to get them on board. Again, that's going to help us get more cases out the door. We do still have 2 in progress. One of those actually is really close. The binder made it about halfway through the process when we realized the competency test needed to be a different type of case. So this is a good example of what I was telling y'all last month, where the review of these binders is definitely not just a checklist that we go down to say that stuff was done. It is to make sure that we're comfortable and confident that when we sign somebody off, that they're ready to do the work on real casework. And so that one right now has been pushed back. They're doing the competency again, and then the binder will again go through the process. But we are confident that he's going to be signed off pretty quickly. And then the other piece of how we're resolving the backlog is outsourcing, like we talked about last month. One change is when we talked last month, we were going to use the vendor that we had been using for the previous project. After some internal discussion, we decided it would be a better route to go ahead and issue a request for proposals to make sure that we have all of the information we need, that and we select the vendor with all of that information. The other piece to this is there's a slight potential that maybe we could pick 2 vendors if it would help us with how quickly we can get the kits back. And so right now, that RFP is actually out. The responses are due to us June 15th. And so we are on track that we'll have the vendor selected and the contract ready to present to y'all in July at the board meeting, so we can still ship the cases in July. So doing the RFP did not impact our timeline as far as when we would ship, but we are confident that it's going to help us make sure that we have the right vendor selected for this next round of outsourcing that we plan to do. And that is all I have. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Castillo.
Thank you.
All right. So it doesn't look like there are any other questions. So we're going to move on to the treasurer's report, item number 10 on the agenda. Mr. David Leach, who's our treasurer and CFO, he will present information regarding the company financials and other fiscal updates. Mr. Leach.
Thank you. David Leach, CFO, and I have shared my screen, and if I shared the correct screen right now, you can see the Houston Forensic Science Center current year budget adjustments. Can you see that?
Hey, David,
Yes.
You might want to make it a little bigger.
Yes, it's very tiny.
Oh, okay. Looks pretty big to me, but I've got glasses. Is that better or bigger?
Can you go just a smidge bigger, and then I think we'll be good. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so this will be a voting item, and you guys should be familiar with this. It is a reallocation to the budget. It is not a change in the budget, and this is still talking about our current year budget. As you know, we are given the amount of money that we expect to spend for the year, and we're going to be really, really close this year. So to have each line item be in line with budget, I have to move a lot of things around, a lot more so than I've ever had to before. But just let me show you what, in my opinion, is most important. If you go down to the bottom right there, you see that the original budget that you approved was a negative 1.4 million. That means that we were going to spend in this year more money than we received in this year. That would be because of a carryover from prior years. The budget that you have approved that we're working under right now is the exact same number. And then I'll show you where we moved grant money around, and then money from the building around, and then other adjustments. And then the budget that I will ask you to approve is the exact same number. So in total, nothing's changed. I've just had to make a lot of adjustments between line items to make sure that where actual spending comes in lines up with the budget, so I'm not overspent on any specific line item. Now I'll go back up to the top, and again, this is what we've gone over multiple times in the past. This first column here would be where we have actually spent grant money, so I move that to the specific line item for the grant spending. The building, there was not any activity on that this quarter where we needed to move any money around there. But we had in prior or earlier in the year, and then other, and that's where most of the activity is, where I just had, well, you see, just for example, in the personnel, I needed to move 250,000 into the health insurance line item and take some out of the others, just so that in total we would be in an agreement. There are a lot of moving pieces this time, and hopefully I have estimated closely enough to where when we actually finish in June, I won't have to ask for any more adjustments, but unless you have specific questions for me, I'm not going to go through this line by line. But if you have specific questions, I will try to address those at this time.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Leach? It doesn't look like that. So, okay, thank you. We need to, I think, vote on the reallocation or the shifting of the monies around. So this will have to be another roll call vote. I'm sorry, was there anything else, Mr. Leach? I didn't want to just kind of walk all over your presentation. Okay.
No. Thank you.
Okay. Alrighty. So is there a motion to approve the reallocated budget?
I so move.
And that is Dr. McPherson, is that you?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I second. Medina.
Thank you, Director Medina, for your second. Are there any questions or is there any further discussion with Mr. Leach? Okay, it doesn't look like anything. Any additional questions or discussion? Madam Secretary, would you please call the vote? And everyone, don't forget to take off your or turn on your the videos and unmute yourself.
And Mr. Leach, before I call the vote, will you please stop sharing your screen so I can get videos back up in the recording? Thank you, sir. Chairwoman Mitchell.
I vote to approve.
Vice Chair Lenschke.
I vote to approve.
Director Vasquez.
I approve.
Director Hilder.
Vote to approve.
Director Medina.
I vote to approve.
Director Blanchett.
I vote to approve.
Director McPherson.
I vote to approve.
Director Moore. Director Moore, your microphone is muted.
I vote to approve.
Thank you. Director Huff.
Okay, looks like the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Leach. Alrighty, let's see, the next item on the agenda are some reports and presentations by some of other staff. Number 11 is the report from Mr. Jerry Pena, the Director of CSU and Digital Multimedia Evidence. He will be talking about an increase in the multimedia request and the crime scene unit's response and preparations for long-term pandemic restrictions, the threat of tropical storms, and the impact of recent protests regarding the death of George Floyd on our CSU operations. Mr. Pena.
Good afternoon. I'd like to start off by congratulating Dr. McPherson and thank you for your time on the board and your service, all your support. Could not have done it without you, sir. So thank you. I'm glad, happy for you on your new endeavors. Sad to see you go. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and please let me know if you can see this. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay. Don't start off. Okay, starting off with the crime scene unit pandemic and protest updates. As you know, crime scene has operated normal schedule, 3 shifts, 24/7 a day. We'll continue to remain on that schedule throughout the pandemic, unless the situation itself drives us to have to do something different. Otherwise, we just will continue to operate as normal. The CSU plans to maintain, yes, the schedule throughout the pandemic as a result. Going back to the staffing, we had several CSIs that became symptomatic and since have tested negative for the virus. And after their recommended quarantine time, they all have returned to normal duty status without any further incidents. On May 2nd, as you guys know, Houston had one of the biggest marches that occurred here in the city of Houston with about 60,000 people in downtown. As a result, crime scene had to do something to help their response in the event that their expertise was needed on scene. With road closures all over downtown, it would have been very difficult for crime scene to become mobile to respond to these scenes. So we worked with the Houston Police Department and actually staffed our evening shift and night shift on Tuesday, May 2nd at the Southwest substation of the Houston Police Department. That facility worked out very well for the crime scene unit. They were very accommodating. They had all the comforts of home, so to speak, with access to the internet, a place to rest, and vending machines and everything. So they were not totally displaced. It wasn't like being here at the office, but nonetheless, I mean, they made it work. Any questions? Oops, got this one. Okay. Okay. As you guys know, the preparation for hurricane season started immediately after hurricane season opened up with Cristobal hitting the Gulf Coast. With at the beginning, the path of the storm was presented a lot of uncertainty and not knowing which direction it was going to go. Houston was initially in the cone of that. So we were forced to have to come up with a contingency plan for the crime scene unit. We worked through that and were able to put actions in place in the event that we were going to have to move to our emergency schedule for the crime scene unit. During the event like that, our emergency schedule consists of 2 12-hour shifts working for the duration of the crisis itself. So depending on how long that crisis was going to be a threat to the Houston area or impacted the Houston area, our crime scene unit was going to maintain a 12 on, 12 off schedule throughout the crisis or the emergency. We had everything in place to do that. Fortunately, Cristobal took a drastic turn toward the east and was away from the Houston area. And we were able to rest and know that on top of everything that we had already been through with going through with the COVID and the March, that we could have a little reprieve from emergency status to handle what Houston is used to, and that's crime. Unfortunately, crime doesn't stop during these events, so we still were able to maintain full deployment to these crime scenes, and we haven't had any issues as far as scene response. We have done a lot in preparation for these storms. As you know, the season, it promises to be busy, and I can rest assured that the crime scene unit will also be prepared for if this happens or when it happens. Working with the Houston Police Department, we have a contingency plan in the event that downtown is prone to flooding. We can deploy these crime scenes and house them at some of the Houston Police Department substations. They have agreed to take us in those type situations and make us part of the team as far as housing us and making sure that we have everything we need to properly deploy to these crime scenes. Any questions on that? Okay, going to the multimedia section. So and I've been reporting on this for a while now. The crime in Houston has been going up, and it has impacted the multimedia section just as much as any other section here at HFSC. With everything being technology based, the increase for video redactions and video analysis and what have you, as far as the digital crime scene aspect of it, the phones and computers, those are all areas where crime is increasing, and the caseload is also increasing. Audio video still responds to scene calls when needed. That has not changed at all. To do a comparison on some of the stats, as you can see here on this page, previous years, last year 19 compared to the same time period this year, cases received and call outs versus cases completed, everything is on the rise here this year. This year is in orange, last year is in blue. As you can see, there's been a 19.8% increase in requests. There's been a 43% increase in completed cases, 24% increase in call outs. Any questions on this graph here? Okay, I'll move forward. As you know, I reported several board meetings ago, the new extraction software, which we call the UFED program, which is the Universal Forensic Extraction Device Program software. It's designed to help extract data from some of the newer iPhones, and now it also includes all the Android phones. And some of the figures I wanted just to make the board aware, some of the figures that we're getting here. The cost initially was $150,000 for the software, and since then we have been able to work 44 phones. Four of those were resubmissions, and what I mean by resubmissions were these were phones that were initially submitted to the multimedia lab for workup, but because we didn't have UFED program at the time, we were unable to break into these phones to do the analysis that they need that they were being requested to do. So 4 of those have since come back, and we have been successful under this new UFED program software, premium software, getting back into those phones and extracting the data that's being requested for investigations. 32 iPhones and 12 Androids. So the program, although new, it's pretty good. People are starting to get used to the fact that we're using this program, and by the way, we're the only ones in this region with this software to allow us to extract data from some of the newer phones as well as the Android phones. Any questions on that?
Yeah, this is Philip Hilder. I'm sorry, I can't find the hand on the icon has disappeared. But anyway, yeah, my question is that UFED premium software, is that commercially available or is that a law enforcement tool?
Well, UFED is through Cellebrite, and Cellebrite is a commercial company. They don't only deal with law enforcement, but predominantly it is law enforcement that uses the program, but it's not restricted to just law enforcement.
And you're saying Cellebrite?
That's the company, yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Pena, I think Director Blancett has a question too.
Okay.
Since we are the only lab in the region that has the software being actively used like this, Are we being asked by any of the other forensic labs that are in Texas or elsewhere to do some of their work, since they might need the software as well, but don't have the budget for it?
Currently, not yet, and we haven't reached out to these labs. That's part of our plan. I mean, the program's only been in place since April, so we're really trying to get a feel for its capabilities and see what kind of caseload it's going to impact our analysts now before we start reaching out to other agencies with this software program. But I can see that happening soon.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
This is Stacy. We do have capacity, or a little capacity to expand, right? So we do have some capacity, but it's not overly huge, right?
Correct. We do currently, we do, because I mean, this is like I said, it's only since April of this year that we've implemented it. I think it's catching on with HPD. So there's right currently there's capacity for other agencies to maybe bring casework to us so that we can work it out through this program. But it, as you know, I believe that with the popularity, the interest may become greater, and at some point we may have a problem with capacity, but currently we're okay.
Okay. And then I think I might have missed it, but with the Androids, prior to using the UFED software, we would not have been able to extract data on those 9 cases, those 9 phones that we were successful. Thus, we've impacted 9 cases, correct?
That's correct. The Androids were not, I mean, with the previous software that we had before we upgraded to the UFED, did not allow us to extract data from Android. It was very difficult, almost impossible.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for your time. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, over here.
Mr. Leach, I think I skipped over something with you. I was looking through all my highlights on my piece of paper here, and I think I missed something. Did you have anything else for us, or were we done with that?
I have a quick update for the treasurer's report.
That was it. I'm so sorry. I just kind of cut you off and kept on moving, so I apologize. So I would like to go back to number 10 and refinish and continue that piece of the treasurer's report that I just so rudely cut you off. I apologize.
That's okay. Let me see if I can get this to, is that visible to you, the chart that you guys are used to seeing?
Yes.
Okay, so really no surprises. Everything is going as expected. This is May, so it's 11 out of 12 months. You'll see that actual numbers are in blue. Budget is orange, which would be 11/12 because 11 months out of 12. And you'll just notice that every amount is really close to the budget amount, which means we're spending all the money that we've been allocated, which is based, you know, I've talked about that in previous months and also in the budget, and also very close to what it was last year. The only outlier is the purchase of the building, so capital of 30+ million. But other than that, it's what you see pretty much every month and what you expect to see. No surprises, nothing to make you aware of. I have the detailed income statement for you where you can see comparison to the current month, year to date, and then any variance year to date, and then the full year budget, which you just approved, for you to look through in detail. But again, there isn't anything in there that I feel is needed to draw your attention to. It's all as expected. And then I come down here, show you the balance sheet. As we get closer to the end of the year, cash becomes smaller and smaller. The only point on that is the same point that I've made multiple times. We are projected to run out of money soon, but there's enough money to fund the payroll for June 17th July 17th, which is the first payroll in fiscal year 21. And I've been in contact with the City of Houston Finance, and they're expecting to, if the budget is approved by the city, and Dr. Stout spoke about that all indications are that everything is going as planned, that they will get us our money for next year within 2 to 3 weeks in July, which is critically important to us because after we pay the July 17th payroll, which is really FY21 money, the bank balance will be zero. So just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. You have a list of grants. There are 7 grants for a total, all of these are active, for a total of 3.7 million. And we have 2.2 million against these grants yet to spend. So I will entertain or try to answer any questions if there are any, but everything's as expected, no surprises.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Leach? Is there anything else? Because I don't want to cut you off again.
No, I'm done.
Okay, thank you, and I apologize. Okay, back to our agenda. Number 12, the report from Ms. Erica Zemak, our quality director. She's going to talk about issues regarding quality assurance, an overview of a disclosure to the Texas Forensic Science Commission, and a review of the blind quality control program, testimony monitoring, and proficiency testing. Ms. Zemak, you have the screen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I just want to let the board know I have a couple of big ticket items on the report today. So not only am I going to try and remember to pause after each slide for questions, but I'm going to try and remember to pause after each topic for questions. So bear with me and let me know if you have any questions as I'm going. So here's a graphical depiction of the quality control submitted for the month of May. As you can see, the quality division met all of their monthly goals for blind quality control submissions last month. For blind quality accomplishments and challenges, here's where enter in big ticket items. The first thing I want to talk to the board about today is an investigation that we did into a toxicology blind quality control. And so when this blind quality control was submitted, it was expected to yield negative BAC or blood alcohol concentration results. However, when the toxicology section performed their testing and analysis, the section reported positive BAC results. In fact, they reported a concentration of 0.24 BAC, which is not only positive, it's informationally approximately 3 times the legal limit here in the state of Texas. And so the quality division initiated an investigation to determine what happened, what was the potential source of error that led to this analysis or to this reported result. And so we investigated 3 potential sources of error. The first being the manufacturer, meaning because we purchased our blind quality controls from a manufacturer for our toxicology blind quality controls, we investigated to see if perhaps the source of error happened at the manufacturer, meaning before that blood tube ever came to HFSC, there was an issue with it. This second possibility would be that the quality division had introduced an error when we were preparing and submitting that sample. And the third, of course, is that the toxicology section could have been responsible for the error. And so all of the evidence from our investigation supported that the error had to have occurred at the manufacturer. And so after several extensive conversations with the manufacturer, we were able to pinpoint that not only did the error have to have occurred at the manufacturer, but that it had to have occurred somewhere within their labeling process. And so when the manufacturer creates labels for our blind quality tubes, they produce 30 labels on a given sheet. And fortunately for us, the manufacturer creates files for those labels, and we were able to review them as part of our investigation. when we reviewed the labels for the 0.24 BAC concentration, one particular sheet of labels specifically, of the 30 labels in that file, 29 of them had the 0.24 BAC concentration listed and 1 had negative. So that further concluded that a error occurred within the labeling process at the manufacturer, and that 0.24 BAC concentration blood product was placed into a tube that had been labeled as negative. And so because our manufacturer is ISO accredited, we are working with them. This will be, I take that, let me say it again. Because our manufacturer is ISO accredited, similar to how we are ISO accredited at HFSC, this error will count as a non-conformance in their quality management system. And so we are actively working with them to discuss and implement an appropriate process improvement to try and prevent anything like this from happening again. Our current conversations involve implementation of a barcoding system similar to that we use here at HFSC and other laboratories utilize as well. Because although a barcoding system can't completely eliminate error from a process, it certainly minimizes the risk of human error in that process. And so we are actively working with them, and I will keep the board informed as to what the ultimate resolution is. That resolution will be documented on their end, and that documentation will be provided to us. I must say that although an unexpected result or a non-expected result and errors in general are never ideal situations, the manufacturer has been extremely responsive in working with us to try and resolve this issue, and I am confident that we'll be able to land on the appropriate process improvement and that we will not have an error of this nature again in the future. All told, though, I do think it speaks very well to the blind proficiency program in the sense that this exemplifies that we do, in fact, test the entire system. In this example, we were able to detect an error that occurred before HFSC even, right? This was one of the first initial steps in the entire process, and our blind proficiency program was able to detect it. Are there any questions about the toxicology blind quality control sample?
Ms. Zemek, I just want to congratulate you guys on catching that, because it really does speak volumes as to how important quality and the blind quality control program really is, and how it can not only impacts what we do at HFSC, but it can also influence others as well, and those along the chain who we interact with. So, I mean, just congratulations to everyone on doing such a great job.
Thank you very much. The second blind quality control sample that I'd like to talk about involved a non-expected result in a biology blind quality control. There were actually 2 samples that we are currently investigating. One of those samples is still being investigated, and with the other, the investigation has been completed, and that's the one that I would like to share details with you today. And so in order to create this specific biology blind quality control sample, a staff member volunteered to essentially take a moistened Q-tip, if you will, and swab her body, specifically in this instance, the back of her neck. And we submitted that sample as a contact sample as a blind proficiency test. We expected that sample to yield a single source female profile. The staff member was female, but what we actually got was a mixture of DNA. Now, in looking at that mixture, we could see that the staff member was the major contributor to that sample, meaning the staff member contributed the most amount of DNA to that sample, but there was also a minor contributor to that sample, and we could see that it was a male minor contributor. And so the quality division, again, had to launch an investigation to determine what exactly happened with this sample. And so there were 4 possibilities of what could have happened. The first was that the staff member actually had the DNA of another person on her body when she swabbed herself. The second would be that because the biology section is outsourcing and this particular blind sample was processed by the outsourced laboratory, it was possible that the outsourced laboratory could have introduced contamination to this sample. Third, it was possible that the biology section could have introduced contamination to this sample. Prior to being outsourced, this swab was examined at the biology section and a cutting of this swab was taken, and that is what was submitted to the outsourced laboratory. So it's possible that during that examination process, the biology section could have contaminated this sample. And fourth, of course, is the quality division. While the quality division was collecting and preparing this sample and submitting this sample, the possibility exists that the quality division could have introduced contamination to this sample. And so throughout our investigation, again, all of the evidence from our investigation supported that there was genuinely DNA from another individual on the staff member when she swabbed herself. And so in speaking to the staff member, she in fact lives with her significant other, and we requested a reference sample from the significant other. And when we generated the DNA profile from that reference sample, the results from the reference sample were consistent with that of the second contributor, that minor male contributor. And so all told, really this blind quality control sample just speaks to the level of sensitivity in DNA testing in this day and age. And as we continue to want to develop and grow the blind quality program and introduce things like mixtures into our biology blind quality program, this kind of information and lessons learned are things that we need to keep in mind when we create those samples. And I will say, as a former DNA analyst, I found this particular case to be fascinating. And really, it just, every step of the investigation just revealed further. The staff member herself also found it very fascinating. And to my understanding, her significant other was also pretty impressed. So again, all told, a success story for the blind quality program. Are there any questions about the biology quality control sample that I can answer? Okay, and lastly, Dr. Stout and I have agreed to author a journal article for the Forensic Science Review. The title of that article will be The Ups and Downs of a Blind Quality Program, HFSC's Perspective. And so the purpose of the article will be to write about blind quality samples that were detected by staff and kind of delve into the details of how staff detected those samples, what the flags were in those samples, and what information we learned from that we could apply to later blind quality samples. We also will talk about cases that were incorrectly identified as blinds. So in other words, actual case evidence that staff believed to be blinds and the details of what it was about those cases that made staff think that it was a blind. We're also going to highlight instances where we had non-expected results, just like the two that I just shared with you now for toxicology and biology. And lastly, we're hoping to incorporate the transcript review program because if you recall, we've introduced a blinding step into our transcript review program where we redact the personally identifying information from the transcripts prior to review. And so I will keep the board updated as things progress with that article. Are there any questions about that article that I or Dr. Stout could answer? Okay. We have made a disclosure to the Texas Forensic Science Commission, or TFSC, regarding testimony. And so this testimony was reviewed as part of the transcript review project. And this testimony dealt very specifically with a former crime scene investigator who was at a scene with multiple footwear impressions. And upon testimony, the crime scene investigator answered questions that were outside of his area of expertise. And so at the crime scene, like I stated, there were several footwear impressions at the scene. And in this CSI's testimony, he went so far as to essentially source these footwear impressions to specific individuals that were known to have been at the scene. And while the crime scene investigator may have used a layman's observations in order to render his opinions, so for example, if one of the footwear impressions had, I don't know, triangular design, and another one of those footwear impressions had circular designs, for example, and the CSI was using, his layman's observations of those shapes, for example, to render his opinions, the obligation was on the CSI to make that clear to the jury. First and foremost, HFSC is not accredited for footwear comparisons. It is not a discipline that is listed on our scope of accreditation. And secondly, this CSI specifically had no formal training in footwear comparisons. And so we have contacted the Harris County District Attorney's Office and notified them about this testimony. The impact on the case remains unclear. The case is still pending. We have reviewed the two other transcripts from the testimonies, the other two testimonies from this analyst while employed at HFSC, and were able to determine that this was an isolated issue. The quality division then created a training video that all technical staff was required to review. And in that training video, we had representation from multiple disciplines here at HFSC and an interview style video where we asked them questions about the most problematic testimony that they have had, and had them talk about times where either they misspoke when they were on the stand and what they had to do to correct the record, as well as times where maybe they didn't say something where they felt that they needed to say something. And again, what they had to do to ultimately correct the record. And so the point of the video was to try and take all of that experience that's scattered throughout HFSC and combine it into one resource that staff can use. And because it's a video resource, staff can reference it as many times as they want to, and also have the options of following up with specific people who were interviewed on the video to try and have further conversations. And lastly, Dr. Stout walked all staff through a video message where we not only informed them about the disclosure, but we went through excerpts of the actual transcript and pinpointed the places in the testimony where the CSI testified beyond his area of expertise. And Dr. Stout drove home two very important messages for staff in this video message. One of which was that it doesn't matter who calls you to testify, whether it's the prosecution or the defense, that when you take the stand, you are a witness to the science, and it is your job to accurately and impartially convey the science to the court. The second of which was that significant difference between a layperson's testimony and an expert witness's testimony, and how there is an obligation on an expert witness to make it clear to the jury and the court that if they are rendering opinions based on anything other than their specific training, expertise, and authorization, that they have an obligation to make that clear to the jury. And so while all of the documents have been provided to TFSC, they have indicated that this disclosure will be included on their July 24th agenda. And lastly, again, I just would like to point out that the way that we discovered or the reason that we became aware of this disclosure was because of the transcript review project. I think it speaks very well to the project that it is functioning beautifully as a complement to in-person testimony. Are there any questions regarding this disclosure?
Ms. Seemack, I believe Ms. Medina has a question.
Okay.
Who elicited the question from the CSI investigator? Was it the prosecutor or the defense?
That is a great question. The conversation started with the defense. However, there was a redirect, and during the redirect, the prosecution also asked questions. And so I would say it would happen on both during the defense, I'm sorry, during cross-examination, I apologize, and also during redirect.
And nobody asked him whether he was an expert in this area?
No, the question was never asked of him whether or not he held expertise within the discipline of footwear comparisons. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions that I can answer regarding the disclosure? Okay. Our internal audit program has finally finished up. We ended up extending the program one day. It was originally slated to end on May 29th, and we extended it that one day to June 1st. All told, the quality division had 8 straight weeks of internal audits, and I'll be honest, it was a grueling 8 weeks. If I could, for just a second, I would like to compliment the ladies in the quality division and say they did a phenomenal job. This was no easy feat. I've never heard of anybody undergoing 8 straight weeks of internal auditing, and quite frankly, having been through it, I do not recommend it to anyone. But we are finished with the internal audits, and again, I just want to thank them for all of their time and energy. I have listed here for you all of the non-conformances affiliated with the internal audit, and while the report is not finalized, technically these numbers could change. I am not anticipating that they will change, and once the report is finalized, it will be posted on eDiscovery. And lastly, I wanted to update the board about our assessment activity. It has been confirmed for July. ANAB will be having a remote virtual assessment. And so we will work with our accrediting body regarding what that looks like and how we are able to accomplish all of the different requirements for an assessment. And we will be flexible with them and do whatever it takes to provide them as much documentation as they need. Are there any questions regarding the internal audits or assessments? Okay. Here is a graphical depiction of the proficiency testing that has taken place so far this year. Are there any questions on proficiency testing that I can answer? Okay. And here is the 2020 testimony data. I know that Dr. Stout spoke about this a little bit in his report, but Harris County has officially suspended trials through June 30th. And while the Texas Supreme Court has recommended suspending jury trials, at this time, we don't know what Harris County will do. Essentially what it means for HFSC and for quality is that no HFSC analysts have testified since March due to the pandemic restrictions. Akila, I know that you had mentioned possibly wanting to comment on this portion of my slide. If you want to jump in, please feel free.
Sure, I won't go into too much detail because I'm not sure exactly how much in the weeds the board would like to go, but I will just say that like any other governmental entity, the courts have a lot of layers, and so the Supreme Court has issued guidance, but even within that guidance, there's discretion to sort of each of the regions and counties to come up with a plan, and so that is basically what has happened and what is continuing to happen here in Harris County. So we have regional administrative judges, we have local administrative judges, and then within each sort of area. So for instance, you know, your district courts, they also have an administrative judge. So there are many layers to it, but the long and short of it is that yes, officially they're saying that they're not pulling juries until June 30th. However, as of June 1st, they have implemented a plan to encourage and tell courts to start having more in-person hearings. And they also have the ability to select cases that need to be actually brought before the court. As you can imagine, we've been doing all of the updated data about how our numbers are trending as far as requests, and so have the courts. And so there was a long, not long, but a few page long assessment of where the courts are and where they've been. And essentially the conclusion was that, the jail population is, still going up, cases are still being filed, and the courts haven't been able to address a lot of pending matters. And there are cases that have been pending for much longer than the recommended, length. So they are definitely gearing back up. So for our analysts, what that means is there is a possibility that they may begin to be subpoenaed for hearings, but they are being strongly encouraged to do remote hearings as much as possible. The big challenge there, obviously, civil versus criminal, is that, criminal court folks have a lot of constitutional rights at issue. And so, you can do a civil hearing with the parties all consenting, no big deal. But in a criminal court, there's so many other considerations. So there are limits to how much they can do remotely. So that's a long version of what I said was going to be short. But we do anticipate things will start to pick up as in-person hearings are starting again.
Oh,
I had a question.
sorry.
Akila, are the criminal district courts still holding, you're still using the civil courthouse?
So in the latest letter, I guess you could say, from out of the courts, they determined based on all the data that it is time for all those judges to go back to their courts in the CJC. It is my understanding from what they wrote that the remodeling for those courts have been done. I haven't been in there in a while, so I can't tell you if that's true or not, or to what extent the remodeling has been done, but apparently they've done enough so that judges can actually go back to their assigned courts and conduct business. So that is a change from what we've seen for the last, however long Harvey was, 2.5 years ago now, that they've been displaced. So so that will be happening as well.
Okay, and then I have the transcript review project update. We are just collecting final signatures on some of our committee evaluations from the last round, and we are gearing up in the month of June to start our second round of requests. And lastly, we have the detailed data. Are there any other questions for me? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are at the end of our agenda. Our next meeting will be July 10th, and if we can really get a quorum there, that would be excellent, because we have quite a few items that we will need to discuss and vote. I'm going to go ahead and call for a motion to adjourn. Don't everybody speak up at once now.
For the last time, I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Dr. McPherson, for making the motion to adjourn. A second? Thank you, Mr. Hilder, for seconding. And I'm sure there will be no discussion, right? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. We will adjourn. And again, thank you, Dr. McPherson, for your service to the Houston Forensic Science Center.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank
We
you,
will
everybody.
close the meeting. It is 3:24 p.m.
Bye.
Goodbye.